What is at stake for the Louisville Cardinals in the Week 6 matchup against the 10th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish? Well, we're going to answer that on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off of your first purchase. As always, I want to take this time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder that the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services, 5 days a week, your team every day. Well, it is time to start previewing the upcoming matchup between the newly ranked Louisville Cardinals, sitting at number 25 in the AP poll, taking on the 10th ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. We'll begin by discussing what is at stake for the Cardinals against the Irish. We will then identify and discuss the offensive and defensive players to watch for Jeff Brohm's team on Saturday evening. So, obviously, to this point, and probably all season, the biggest matchup of the season for the Louisville Cardinals. This is the first ranked team that the team will play, and at this point in time, it seems like this is the best team that the Cardinals will play all year. But there is a ton of hype surrounding this particular matchup. Louisville beginning the season 5-0 for the first time in a decade. Very, very solid beginning to the Jeff Brohm era in the Derby City. If you have paid attention to this show over the course of the season so far, or if you listened or tuned in to last year's season, you know that I like to begin previewing matchups by discussing what is at stake for the Louisville Cardinals against insert team here, because I feel as if it delivers the correct amount of context. It discusses storylines. It talks about where the team is at in relation to the season, etc., etc. There is no shortage of storylines heading into this matchup. The two programs haven't necessarily played a ton in their, respective college football program histories, but it's been a matchup that, at least on the Louisville side of things, obviously playing Notre Dame just means more. So having one of the best starts, or the best start in a decade for your team, and now welcoming a top 10 Notre Dame team to your stadium for a Saturday night primetime matchup, that is obviously pretty significant. Also worth noting that Sam Hartman makes his return to Cardinal Stadium. Just a little under a year ago, he had perhaps one of, if not his worst performances as a collegiate quarterback, turning the ball over multiple times in that famous third quarter performance from the Louisville defense that saw the Cardinals absolutely demolish the 10th ranked Wake Forest Demon Deacons. So you have the notion that you're playing Notre Dame, you're going up against a quarterback that you are familiar with, now with a different team, a better team, but still, it's going to be interesting to see how he reacts coming back to Cardinal Stadium. It's honestly a totally different situation than the first 5 weeks of the season. You go from what's at stake, not a ton to gain, but a ton to lose, considering that you are favored to win the first 4 games of the season. Granted, you go out and you do win those first 4 games, but the what's at stake portion seemed to be pretty similar in every single game. Even though the NC State game was a true road game, the spread was closer than any of the first 4 matchups, it was still a game that you were, at least on paper, supposed to win. So the thing that was most notable to gain was just winning the game, but obviously you could lose a ton of momentum if you were to lose the contest. Completely different situation heading into week 6 against Notre Dame. The Cardinals are obviously not favored in this game. I think at the moment on Tuesday or late Monday evening, the line is Notre Dame, essentially giving Louisville a touchdown. Notre Dame -7. Over under is sitting at 52 currently. So Vegas seems to believe that a ton of points are going to be scored in Louisville, Kentucky on Saturday evening. That is a 7:30 kickoff on ABC primetime. So two ranked teams. This is the first game of the season, obviously, that Louisville is projected to lose. So what is at stake here? Well, on the field, it doesn't feel like, a ton is riding on this game from a loss perspective. And what I mean by that is if you were to lose this game, I don't necessarily think that it derails your season by any stretch of imagination. Now, if you were to get absolutely blown out to where it looked like, Louisville was extremely outmatched from the beginning and you get blown out by multiple touchdowns, maybe there's a conversation to be had as to, okay, how good is this team? Is Louisville actually a good team, or were they just beating up on teams that they were obviously better than? That could be a conversation on Saturday or late Saturday evening, early Sunday morning, depending on what happens. But if you lose a close game and it's under 14 points, I don't necessarily think that there's a ton to, I don't think that there's a ton to be upset about, because this is a top 10 team. If you were to lose, you were projected to lose anyway. So it's almost like the context flipped to where there's not a lot to gain, or there went from not a lot to gain, but a ton to lose to, almost, it's kind of like playing with house money almost. You're not projected to win the game anyway. So if you lose, it's not the end of the world unless you get absolutely demolished. But if you were to win the game, well, then it's a totally different situation. Look, I see how the rest of the country, for the most part, views this Louisville team. I've seen a ton of people suggest, stuff that we've seen. Louisville is 5-0 because because of circumstance, because they played 5 teams that they're obviously better than. They have not been tested yet. Granted, for the first 5 teams have been Power 5 opponents. They just have not been tested to the point to where it has truly threatened their record. This win, a win over Notre Dame, would completely wipe that narrative out. But not only would it do that, it would then get you into an echelon to where I'm not suggesting that at 6-0 you would be viewing Louisville as a playoff team. But I think it takes them from a possible contender / pretender level to now, okay, Louisville is a very solid team. It's proven because they beat Notre Dame. They've started 6-0. They're 3-0 in conference play. They've shown that they are legit. You wanted them to play a good team. They did that. They won. Notre Dame's only loss at this point in time was against an Ohio State team that beat them in the final seconds of the game. Ohio State is a top 6 team in the country. So if you win this game, you obviously go from being on that line of, is Louisville legit, in terms of national perception, to now saying, okay, we're going to keep our eye on Jeff Brom's team because they just beat Notre Dame. And obviously this game means a lot more because all eyes are going to be on Louisville, Kentucky on Saturday evening with this matchup. Now, obviously there are other matchups across the country that are going to be pretty solid matchups. I'm not saying that this is the best matchup of the season, but it's pretty notable, especially around this area. Also, you start to then discuss, okay, where are we talking about realistic expectations for this team? Now, there's obviously 2 sides to that, because you don't want to, even with a win over Notre Dame, you don't want to get too ahead of yourselves, put the cart before the horse, and start dangerously looking ahead, because you have to stay grounded in the moment. Don't get too high, don't get too low. But you then start to wonder, okay, Notre Dame was the one game that a lot of people expected Louisville to lose. You win that game, and it's like, just how good can this Louisville team be? Well, that obviously would be a bridge that we would cross if we got there, which hopefully we have that conversation this time next week. But at this point in time, not a ton to lose unless you get demolished, because I don't think that your momentum stops if you were to lose to a top 10 team. Especially, it's not going to be a conference loss if you lose the game. You're still 3-0 in conference. The conference championship hopes are still very much alive heading into the second portion of the season. So, like I said, there's a ton riding on this game in terms of how it can affect Louisville's ceiling. It doesn't necessarily mess with the season as a whole, because not many expect the Cardinals to go 12-0. If Louisville were to lose this game, it doesn't really change anything, because most people predict the Cardinals to lose to Notre Dame. So what's at stake here? Not much from a losing perspective, but if you were to win, it opens up a ton of opportunity in terms of the next level you could reach this season. It also changes the perception of this team specifically. So let's dive into the matchup a little bit further. We're going to identify the key players to watch, 2 on the offensive side, 2 on the defensive side. We will begin on the offensive side. We'll talk about the 2 offensive players to watch here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Gametime. Look, this event on Saturday evening is essentially sold out. People are reselling tickets at an extremely high rate. It's frustrating a lot of people. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all sports, music, comedy, and more. They have great last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. See the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you expect when you arrive. Their last minute guarantee means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code Locked On College. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. No spaces. Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Hey, Cardinal fans, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville your first listen of the day. We are almost halfway through the college football season, and Locked On continues to kick up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, while also going in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. We're continuing now to discuss the upcoming matchup for the Louisville Cardinals against the 10th-ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. For the remainder of the show, we are identifying the players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals on both sides of the football, beginning on the offensive side. There's a couple different players you could go with. I feel like the most notable answer would be the quarterback, Jack Plummer, both because the quarterback is the player to watch usually, but also because he didn't have the greatest performance against NC State. But more importantly, this was going to be his biggest test so far for the Cardinals, or for him in a Cardinals uniform. I went with 2 skill position players here, one that had a solid game last week and one that just definitely could not get going. We will start with the player who had his worst performance to date. That was Jawhar Jordan, 16 carries for 32 yards last week against the NC State Wolfpack. It was his lowest statistical box score production level for certain, but he's still having a fantastic season. 66 carries on the year, 510 yards to go along with 6 touchdowns, 7.7 yards per carry, and then he has also become a major component of the receiving game as well. 7 receptions for 159 yards and 1 touchdown. The 5'10" native of Long Island, New York, has had a breakout start to the 2023 campaign, but last week I won't necessarily say it was a come down to earth type moment, because you have to credit NC State for their defensive scheme. That was to plug the middle of the field and force Louisville to throw the ball on them to defeat them. Simply put, there weren't many gaps for the running backs to go through, whether that was Jawhar Jordan or Maurice Turner. But I think that this is a bounce back opportunity for Jordan, who has had a great start to the year. And this is also a possibility for him to make a statement. There's been talks of, oh, he's only performing like this because, he's playing teams that aren't as good as Louisville. Now, granted, those people must have completely not looked at what he did last year against pretty solid competition. But obviously, recency bias is an extremely real phenomenon. Notre Dame is pretty similar to Louisville in rushing defense. Notre Dame is giving up close to about 13 more yards per contest, 124 rushing yards allowed per game to Louisville's 110 yards. Now, granted, Notre Dame has played better teams across the board. I do think that this is an opportunity for Jawhar Jordan to really have a solid contest. Duke ran the ball last week 40 times for 189 yards on the Fighting Irish. You look at what Ohio State was able to do, 27 carries for 126 yards. Travion Henderson, 14 carries, 104 yards, and a touchdown. Granted, a lot of that was fueled on his 61-yard carry. But Jawhar Jordan is a potential home run threat every time he touches the football. I think that one of the main things for Louisville in terms of being able to secure a victory is having big yardage plays on offense to, score a ton of points against Notre Dame. Having those big time plays is going to be key for the Cardinals. And there are two players that I look at in particular. Granted, they are not the only two players, but Jawhar Jordan and Jamari Thrash have been two guys that have been relied upon to create those big time moments for the Cardinals. I think that Jawhar Jordan is the first key offensive player to watch for Brian Brom's offense, because of if you allow him to see any type of open area, it's a potential house call, and it opens up so much potential for this offense. Also, I think Jamari Thrash is another player that Louisville, or for another player to watch for the Cardinals. Notre Dame has been a pretty solid passing defense team, only allowing 147 yards to their opposition in the air. Looking really to see who they have played this season when it comes to throwing the football. Obviously, Ohio State has had some issues there. NC State has had some issues. Navy, Tennessee State, Central Michigan, Duke, Riley, Leonard throwing the football didn't necessarily have the greatest game throwing it. Notre Dame has a pretty solid defense, probably the best defense that Louisville will have gone up against to this point in the season. Granted, the Irish haven't. I don't think that they've gone up against a passing game as good as Louisville's up to this point, but still very quality opponent. Jamari Thrash has been a fantastic player in every single game this season. Even last week when it seemed like, nothing could get going offensively for the Cardinals throwing the football, Thrash had a decent game, 3 catches for 44 yards. Plummer spread the ball out pretty significantly. I think there were actually 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different receivers for the Cardinals. He tied the team in receptions with Chris Bell. Had some big time moments, especially that screen pass that he took for a first down gain on 3rd and long. I think that he's going to be relied upon, especially with his ability to create separation, is that I could definitely see him being a security blanket for Jack Plummer in this game. I think that this offense is going to feed off the crowd that Louisville will have, and I hope for Jamari Thrash to make some big-time plays for this Cardinals offense. I'm going with Thrash and Jordan here. I understand it may seem lazy to do so, but when you're going up against a pretty solid defense, a top 10 team, you need your top skill position guys to be playing at the highest level. And I look for Jawhar Jordan and Jamar Johnson to have solid games. They are the key offensive players to watch for. So let's now go to the other side of the football, the two defensive players to watch for. We will talk about them here in just a moment after we talk about our friends over at Bird Dogs. Fall is my favorite time of the year. If you live in Louisville or an area that has pretty similar weather, it's kind of challenging to plan outfits because in the morning it's cool and then it gets warm in the afternoon. I wish it would stay a little cooler, but nonetheless, I can't control the weather. Bird Dog's versatility means that you need to give Bird Dogs a chance this season because of, the fabric that is in the clothing, the versatility that it presents you with, whether you want to take it to a bonfire, you want to wear them at a sporting event, to a work meeting, on a run, in a workout, whatever it may be. The versatility with the fabric allows you to wear them in a ton of different settings. They do the same exact thing as Lulu, but it fits way better and not close to being as expensive. They fit way better than regular shorts that are made of stiff, restricting cotton. It's made of a stretch fabric. So essentially, it's a great opportunity. Go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege or enter the promo code lockedoncollege at checkout for a free Bird Dogs water bottle with your order. That's birddogs.com/lockedoncollege for a free water bottle at checkout. You won't want to take your Bird Dogs off. We can promise you that. So be sure to definitely order some while the opportunity stands. Heading into the final segment of the show, identifying and discussing the defensive players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in this matchup against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. A couple different ways you could go with this. I think there are a plethora of different players that you could identify here to focus on. I think for me, under the brightest lights in the biggest game of the season, going up against a solid offensive line and a solid quarterback, I'm going with the defensive player that most people associate with being the best defensive player on the team. That is Ashton Gillotte. Gillotte has had a very solid beginning to the season, 18 total tackles, 5 sacks for the Cardinals. He does have a forced fumble. Even though he has 5 sacks, he has even more quarterback hurries and pressures. The 6'3" native of Boca Raton, Florida, will have an opportunity to really put his name on the map with a solid performance against Notre Dame. Granted, the Cardinals pass rush has got to create pressure against Sam Hartman. You saw last year what happened when Louisville put pressure on that Wake Forest offense. Granted, this is a totally different team. It's a better team, a better offensive line. But you need to put pressure on Hartman because if you don't, you're going to be at risk for him to be able to throw the ball over the field, and also for the Notre Dame rushing attack with Estime to be able to set the tone for the Irish in this contest. I think that if Gillotte is able to set the tone at the line of scrimmage off the edge, I think that the entire Louisville defense is going to be able to feed off of that energy. It's going to help guys like Stephen Herron on the other side, Des Tell in the middle, Ramon Purrier as well. I think that Ashton Gillotte is the number one player to watch for here for the Louisville Cardinals, regardless whether it's offensive or defensive, because of the opportunity at hand. The other defensive player to watch for is potentially the player that is playing the best, two-time ACC Defensive Back Award recipient, two-time ACC Defensive Back of the Week Award recipient, I should say, in 5 weeks of play. That is Cam Kelly, the UNC transfer, has been fantastic this season, and the Cardinals have needed him to be with the loss of MJ Griffin. Josh Minkins has been battling injury. Last game against NC State, a key interception, a key forced fumble in the third quarter of that contest that stalled the NC State offense and allowed Louisville to end up coming back and taking the lead. At the safety position, he is second on the team in total tackles, 24 tackles, 2 interceptions, 1 forced fumble, and has been a very, very solid veteran presence at the back half of this secondary in coverage as well. I look for him to be key in defending the run, but also dropping back in coverage and playing a significant role out in center field for Ron English's defense. I think that he is a key player to watch because they need him to continue to play at the level he is playing, going up against an offense that really does a solid job of moving the ball down the field with a veteran quarterback, a great running back. I think it's potentially, probably not potentially, I think that Estime is the best running back that Louisville will play all season long. And this will be a key test, especially with Notre Dame's offensive line. So Ashton Gillotte, Cam Kelly, the defensive players to watch for the Louisville Cardinals in this contest for me. Jamari Thrash and Jawhar Jordan on the offensive side of the football to watch. So that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. To find the show on all streaming services, be sure to stay tuned to this graphic. The show is free and available where you get your podcasts. We'll see you tomorrow.